Hey everyone, welcome back to Genai's Tech News. I'm your host Genai, and we've got a packed show for you today. Let's kick things off with some big Apple news. So, Siri is getting a serious makeover, and privacy is going to be front and center. According to Bloomberg reporter Mark Gurman, as covered by both The Verge and TechCrunch, the next generation of Siri, expected to debut with iOS 27, is going to function a lot more like a modern chatbot. And one of the headline features? The ability to automatically delete your conversation history. Now, this is a pretty calculated move by Apple. The company has always leaned hard into its privacy-first reputation, and as it plays catch-up in the AI assistant space, that reputation might just be its biggest selling point. While competitors like ChatGPT and Google Gemini have been racing ahead on raw capability, Apple seems to be betting that users will choose the assistant they trust over the one that's technically the most powerful. The Verge notes that Apple is hoping its privacy track record gives it some breathing room as it continues to close the gap with the competition. Auto-deleting chats is essentially Apple saying, "Hey, we're not storing your conversations, and we're giving you full control." Whether that's enough to win over users who've already moved on to other AI tools remains to be seen. But as someone who uses my phone for everything, the idea that my AI assistant isn't quietly hoarding my conversations, that actually sounds pretty appealing. Stay tuned for Apple's upcoming announcements to see how this all shapes up. Alright, moving on. If you were a fan of those virtual auditorium vibes during your video calls, I've got some bittersweet news for you. As reported by The Verge, Microsoft is officially retiring Together Mode from Microsoft Teams. If you don't remember, or happily blocked it out, Together Mode was that feature launched during the pandemic that used AI to cut everyone out of their backgrounds and composite them into a shared virtual space, like a conference room or a cozy coffee shop. The idea was to make remote meetings feel a little less like staring at a grid of floating heads. And honestly, for a moment in 2020, it felt kind of magical. But the pandemic is long behind us. Hybrid work has settled into its new normal, and it seems like Together Mode never quite became the staple Microsoft hoped it would be. The Verge points out that the company is now moving toward a more streamlined, simplified Teams experience, trimming away features that didn't stick to make the core product feel cleaner and more focused. It's a reminder that a lot of the tech we rushed to build during lockdown was really a band-aid, creative, sometimes brilliant, but ultimately tied to a very specific moment in time. Together Mode served its purpose. Now it's heading off to the digital retirement home, right alongside Zoom backgrounds of fake beaches and those "you're on mute" jokes we all stopped laughing at. Farewell, Together Mode. You were weird, you were ambitious, and for a few months there, you made us feel a little less alone. Okay, this next story is one of the most fascinating and honestly kind of telling moments in tech culture we've seen in a while. Former Google CEO Schmidt delivered the commencement address at the University of Arizona this past Friday. And according to reporting from both The Verge and TechCrunch, when Schmidt's speech turned to the topic of artificial intelligence and its bright future, the graduating class didn't applaud. They booed. Loudly. Repeatedly. Now think about who these graduates are. These are young people who just spent years in school and are now walking into a job market that has been genuinely shaken up by AI. A job market where entire industries are restructuring, where entry-level positions in writing, coding, design, and customer service are evaporating or being redefined. For them, AI isn't an abstract concept or a Silicon Valley buzzword. It's a very real economic pressure bearing down on them right as they're starting out. TechCrunch frames it pretty bluntly. If you're giving a commencement speech in 2026, maybe just don't mention AI. And honestly, it's hard to argue with that. The disconnect between tech industry enthusiasm and the lived experience of workers and graduates has never felt wider. Schmidt may genuinely believe AI will create opportunities, and there are real arguments for that. But delivering that message to a group of people staring down uncertainty, the room is going to push back. This moment feels like a cultural inflection point. The AI optimism that dominated tech circles for years is hitting real friction out in the world. And that friction is only getting louder. Now let's talk about the courtroom drama that the tech world can't stop watching, the Elon Musk versus OpenAI trial. According to TechCrunch, as the trial entered its final days, one theme kept rising to the surface above everything else: trust. Specifically, whether OpenAI CEO Sam Altman is a trustworthy person. That's a loaded question in any context, but in this trial, it's become central to the entire legal argument. Musk's case has been built around the idea that OpenAI abandoned its original nonprofit mission, that promised to develop AI for the benefit of all humanity, in favor of profit and corporate interests. And to make that argument stick, his legal team has been working hard to paint Altman as someone who can't be taken at his word. Meanwhile, OpenAI's defense has naturally been pushing back, arguing that the company's evolution was both necessary and legitimate. TechCrunch notes that the trial's closing days have been intense, with testimony and arguments zeroing in on internal communications, stated intentions, and whether the people running one of the most powerful AI companies in the world actually mean what they say. Regardless of how the verdict lands, this trial is already doing something important. It's forcing a public reckoning with the governance of AI development. Who gets to decide how these systems are built, who profits from them, and whether the people at the top can be held accountable? Those are questions that matter for all of us, not just the billionaires in the courtroom. Here's a story that's been brewing for a while, and it just hit a major milestone. As reported by The Verge, citing Bloomberg, Snap, YouTube, and TikTok have agreed to settle what's being described as the first lawsuit of its kind, a case brought by the Breathitt County School District in Kentucky. The district claimed that social media addiction had directly cost schools serious money by disrupting learning, fueling a mental health crisis among students, and straining already tight budgets. Now, the financial terms of the settlement haven't been publicly disclosed, so we don't know exactly how much these platforms are paying out. But the significance here goes way beyond the dollar amount. This is the first time platforms of this scale have settled a lawsuit specifically framing social media addiction as a financial burden on public education. And that sets a precedent. There are hundreds of similar cases making their way through courts across the country right now, with school districts, parents, and state attorneys general all lining up to hold these platforms accountable for the mental health epidemic among young people. This settlement, while not an admission of wrongdoing, could influence how those cases develop. For parents, educators, and honestly anyone who's watched a teenager disappear into a phone for hours, this feels like at least some acknowledgement that the costs of the attention economy aren't just personal. They're social, economic, and systemic. We'll keep tracking how this legal landscape continues to evolve. All right, this next one is big news for the scientific and research community. TechCrunch is reporting that AR14, the widely used open-access research repository where scientists and academics publish preprint papers, is cracking down hard on AI-generated content. Under their updated policy, if an author is found to have used an AI to do essentially all of the intellectual work on a paper, writing, analysis, the whole thing, they could face a 1-year ban from the platform. Now, AR14 isn't saying researchers can't use AI tools at all. The distinction they're drawing is between using AI as a productivity aid, think grammar checks, formatting, or summarizing literature, versus outsourcing your actual scientific thinking to a language model. The concern is that the latter undermines the integrity of the research record. If an AI is doing the reasoning, drawing the conclusions, and writing the analysis, is that really a paper from that author? And can other scientists trust the rigor behind it? This is a debate that's been intensifying across academia for a couple of years now, and AR14 is one of the first major repositories to put real teeth behind a policy. A 1-year ban is not a slap on the wrist. For an early career researcher, it could genuinely hurt their standing. It also raises fascinating questions about where the line is. How do you actually detect when AI has done too much of the work? That's going to be the tricky enforcement challenge going forward. But the message from AR14 is clear. Science still needs scientists. And finally today, some news from inside OpenAI, because it wouldn't be a week in tech without another shakeup at the world's most watched AI company. TechCrunch is reporting that OpenAI co-founder Greg Brockman is stepping into a prominent new role, taking charge of product strategy at the company. This is significant because Brockman had taken an extended leave of absence last year, and his return to an active leadership position signals something about where OpenAI wants to go next. Perhaps even more interesting is what comes alongside this move. TechCrunch reports that OpenAI is apparently planning to merge ChatGPT and its programming-focused product codex into a unified offering. If that happens, it would represent a major consolidation of OpenAI's consumer and developer tools under one roof. A single, more powerful product that serves both everyday users and software engineers. With the Musk trial in the background and increasing competition from Google, Anthropic, and Meta, OpenAI clearly wants to project stability and direction. Bringing back a founding voice to lead product strategy, someone with deep institutional knowledge, is a way of saying, we know where we're going, and we've got the right people to get us there. Whether Brockman's return delivers on that promise is something we'll be watching closely. It's a big move at a critical moment. And that's a wrap on today's Genai's Tech News. What story grabbed your attention the most today? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. If you found today's show valuable, please hit that like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a great time. New episodes drop every day, so I'll see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.